Or as I did last time, hear ye. I liked that, yeah. I'll just begin with the acknowledgement of country. We are so lucky to be able to come together and share stories on this beautiful Noongar. I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, this space where we are meeting this evening. The Menang people have been here on this Noongar for thousands of years, and the connection they share with this place we call the Great Southern runs generations deep. It is with respect that I acknowledge the Menang people and their elders, past, present, and emerging. Thank you. And I'd love a big, enormous Albany round of applause for Geraldine. Thank you so much for coming down to see us.
Oh, that is an absolute pleasure. This is one of my favourite parts of the world, no joke. And just thank you for coming out on a cold, wintry night, and thank you for reading my book. It's a bit of a thrill, I have to tell you.
And how was the drive? Did you drive down today?
I did. It was really good, actually. It was. It wasn't a lot of traffic. I did buy some clothes at Williams. Jumper.
Perfect. Yep, layers.
No, it was lovely. It was just. I think I've got this theory that when you drive out of the city and the landscape starts to open up, I have a theory that because I start to feel very relaxed at that point, that something about triggers your peripheral vision to go. You can see outside the straight lines of a city, and there's just something about it happens every single time, and it also makes me want to write.
Yeah.
So who knew?
I'm glad that we could maybe spark a bit of creative fire.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the thing about being in the city, right? Your peripheral vision is exclusively reserved for merging traffic. Whereas instead you can just take in fields and forest. I love that forest as you drive out of Perth.
And the canola fields and the lime green. And I must admit, I was in a bit of a hurry, so I was driving as fast as I could. But on the way back, I'm going to stop and do all those touristy photos of the canola fields. So,
perfect. Yeah, it's golden, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and it just brings to mind The Wizard of Oz, right? I'm not the only one that sings that. Perfect. Good. See, this is why we are kindred souls. All right. So, debut novel. How's it been? I saw that you launched with the wonderful Gillian O'Shaughnessy. Tell us about the launch process and the touring process and all of that.
Well, I've been very lucky. HarperCollins treated me really well, and I had 2 launches, and one was with gorgeous Gillo, whose book is in my bag actually, and we did that at Fremantle Library, and we actually had pretty big turnout, and it was, I think, in all of this, there's such a joy for me in something that was actually in my head. People are taking seriously, and they want to talk to me about it, and they want to talk about the characters, and they want to talk about the story. And honestly, that never gets old. And it's an absolute thrill. And I did another one. I'll tell you a little bit later about the process I went through to make sure that the voice of lived experience was in this book. And so one of my sensitivity readers, Sam Jenkinson, was at the second launch, and she and I shared the stage. And the beautiful Amber Cunningham from ABC Radio was the interviewer. And Sam was there because she is the woman with a disability who has the lived experience. And so that felt really fantastic to be able to come at it from, a number of points of view. And it was a beautiful thing. And then I went to Melbourne. There was a disability symposium on young people in nursing homes, and I'd been in touch with these people over many years, and they said, come over as part of our symposium, launch your book. And I did that. I met a couple of young people who'd recently been in nursing homes, which was a bit shocking, but beautiful people. And I think that knowing that people with disabilities who've been in this situation actually think that the book is true to life. It wasn't a big event, but that meant more to me than a whole lot of other things, because it meant I was on the right road, and I acknowledge all the help that I've had. So really, really good. And I've been going around bookstores, and that's kind of super important, as you would know, and which I didn't know. You kind of go around before you've published, and you get introduced to the booksellers, and then you go back once you've published and you sign books. And I thought, oh, okay, whatever. But in fact, if the booksellers have your book on their mind, then, they're likely to recommend it. And I went around in Melbourne, and I went into one bookstore, and the guy said, oh, I can't find your book. It should be over in this section. And he said, oh, sorry, it's been it's been wrongly shelved, and it's kind of, you know, like underneath all this stuff. Let me put it out here. So it's been a lovely time.
I saw that I think you had a picture in front of the Paperbark bookshop in Melbourne. It's the tiniest little store. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that store. It's my favourite.
And I think I went there and the lady said, I'm really sorry, I didn't know about your book. And she said, I'm going to get it in now. And it was like, wow, that was amazing. So, yeah, it's been great.
And there's been some discourse recently, I feel like you guys may have seen it, around the amount of books that are getting published. You know, there's so much choice, and there's no possible way for a bookstore to stop every single thing that's getting published. And it does make such a difference when we meet the author and we get to hear their thoughts rather than the blurb sometimes, or you know, we might go through hundreds of titles in a sell-in for 1 month's releases. And so having more than, 30 seconds to experience a book, it makes such a big difference.
I think also unfortunately, there is that east-west divide. So in Western Australia, and especially because I've worked for the ABC, you know, there's a few people who know me, but in the other side of Australia, I'm a nobody. And so turning up and saying, hello, and this is what it's about, was really important, and I'd like to do some more of that. Yeah.
Awesome. HarperCollins, you heard it here.
Yep.
So we're going to zoom right out now. We're very nosy. We like to hear about our authors when they're young and what their approach or experience of reading was. Were they rabid readers, or did they come to it later, and how that influenced their writing?
I am a rabid reader, and I was lucky because both my parents loved to read. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, my mum used to read to me every night when I was little, and I remember wanting so much to read, and I can almost pinpoint the time when I knew the story really well and I would hear her voice and I'd be following the words, and then there was just a point at which I started to recognise the words, and for me that was the biggest form of magic. It felt like real life magic. And from then on, you know, I was off and running. So I was the kid. We didn't go away a lot in the holidays. And, you know, I saw some friends, but I would be down at the library and I would come home with a stack of books like that. And we had a hammock in the backyard and it was underneath a passion fruit vine. So in the summer, I was, you know, working my way through the pile and plucking off the passion fruits and tearing them open and eating passion fruits and going for a swim and then at the beach and then coming home and reading more. So I was a bit of a nerdy kid, but really just very, very lucky. And I think we were talking tonight about I can't live without reading and I can't sleep without reading. I really can't. And and you're the same, right? And I have towers of books beside my bed, and I kind of have, and I travel with a couple of books at least. So, I'm a reader first and foremost.
Yeah. I have to every now and then purge those towering piles because they start falling over, and I'm like, okay, all right, let's put you back. And then I end up coming back with like another 5 from like the to be read, shelves. I'm weird. I separate what I've read and what I haven't read. They're in separate bookcases. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Because otherwise I just feel like they get all mixed in. Yeah. And also I get such a thrill when I shelve it. Yeah. And I feel much more pressure to keep my read section tidy, because generally I've given it the chance. I've maybe feel like I've read it, I've taken what I needed from it, and maybe I can pass it on. Whereas my unread ones, I don't know yet. I still need to find out.
I moved a couple of years ago and I had this ginormous sort of set of bookshelves, and I don't have any in my house, and all the books are in the shed. And it's been a couple of years. I'm just now looking at getting them out because I miss them. I miss walking past them. I miss them as friends. Yeah. But I'm also a really big library person because I can't afford my own habit anymore. So I'm at the library. I'm the person, checking out about 15 at once. Yeah.
And what were you checking out when you were young versus now? Like, who's your most checked out author then versus now?
Well, I was a big magic kid, so I was reading every Enid Blyton book I could. Yeah. And The Faraway Tree, I still haven't seen the movie, but The Faraway Tree was just it for me. Nancy Drew, but I think when I got to high school was the first time when we did Randolph Stowe's Merry-Go-Round by the Sea, it was the first time I'd actually read an Australian book, and I remember him writing about the crunch of the figs under his sandals and the smell, and I thought, oh, you can write about Australia. I mean, it was a long time coming, but so then I kind of changed direction and read all over, and then I did at uni. I did a languages degree, but I did a certain amount of English in there, and I read in French too. So I was reading kind of classics.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. See, I wish I'd come to Australian fiction earlier. I feel like that is so true, that you're raised on so much British, generally British sort of classics and things like that, which are wonderful. But there's so many Australian children's classics that I didn't even come across. Yeah. Same. And now I'm like, so I force, my niece and nephew to read them for me. And what are you checking out now? What's your most recent read and top recommendation?
How long have you got?
Ages.
I've just done an event called the Big Day of Books at ABC Perth, and it was like a little mini festival, and they had about 5 sessions. So I was very lucky. I kind of moderated one session and then was part of another session with my book. And in that session I was part of, it was called Sleepless in Satire. And I've just finished a couple of those. Kerry Jules, A Little Unwell. So Kerry Jules is an incredible woman. She's a nuclear physician, so she does all the radio imaging and everything. And she's written this book from a perspective of a medical student who's like in their second year at a hospital. And the humour, it's a lot of black humour, but it is outstanding. I was snorting and laughing and also wincing and thinking, never want to go to the emergency department ever after this. But fantastic. Another woman who was there was called Fiona, I remember the title, Kill Your Boomers. And, being a boomer, that made me a little nervous, but she writes in the persona of this young woman who's probably early 30s and who's been renting forever and a day, and who, like so many young people, just is never going to be able to afford a house, right? And so she's in her umpteenth share house, and there's a hole in the floorboards in the kitchen that the landlords had said they definitely will fix and haven't. And this hole in the floorboards starts to talk to her. And it has some very dark thoughts about what she should do to get her house. And it's in the title, Kill Your Boomers. Again, it is very funny, quite dark, and just fantastic. So I've read those two. The other one that I really loved was by a Canadian guy called Glenn Dixon, called The Infinite Sadness of Small Appliances. Yeah. And it's beautiful, and it's kind of sci-fi. It's in the voice of a little robot vacuum cleaner called Scout. And she calls herself Scout because she's the man of the house, elderly man, has been reading to his wife To Kill a Mockingbird. And Scout, the little robot vacuum cleaner, is sentient. And you realise gradually that the house runs itself for the humans, but then when his wife dies, the network, which is this larger thing, comes into play. And I don't want to give away too much. Really superb and thought-provoking book. And the last one I'll say is I tend to listen to non-fiction on Audible. And I've been listening to and obsessed by Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams, which is her story of working at Facebook and the internal workings of Facebook. Sarah Wynne Williams is being sued by Facebook. She's not allowed to talk about her book, be in a street where her book is sold in a bookshop, or be in an airport where her book is in a bookshop. So you can imagine that she has some pretty explosive things to say. It is riveting and it's incredibly well written, and she narrates it. So that's my...
I do love an audiobook where the author narrates it, particularly if it's non-fiction. It just feels like they're talking to you, doesn't it? Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we've got all of those on the shelf. So thank you. Those are some good recommendations. Excellent. And some really good Australian fiction there as well. All right. So writing. How do you write? Do you write in a hermetically sealed room with red string all over the walls? Do you write on the go as you can? Are you require ambient noise in a cafe? And how does writing differ when you're writing fiction versus writing for your other work? Big question,
don't
sorry.
have the red string on the wall. I wish I did, because I'm not much of a planner until it kind of gets later in the piece and maybe the editing process, and then everything has to add up.
You're a pantser.
I'm a pantser. Just a bit of advice, never write a book that goes day 59, because when you get to day 160 something and then your editor goes, that doesn't chime, and you're, oh God, I've got to go back through the whole thing. I've written this over a really long time. From the getting it published and the publication process took about over 3 years, and the actual writing of it was in bits and bobs over about 7 years or so. So I've got to hurry up with the next one or I'll be dead. It's gone variously. So I had the idea. I'm a note jotter. I love little sticky notes.
Yeah.
So there's that. I journal. So there's that. But I also have done some courses, and I went and did one with Charlotte Wood over a weekend in Melbourne. I happened to be over there working, and I just thought it was fantastic. And I wrote 20,000 words when I came home. So it goes really up and down with me. I learnt from reading a lot of books and talking to a lot of people that my best way of continuing to write most days, was to set the bar really low. So sometimes the bar was set at 20 words, and sometimes the bar was set at 1,000 or whatever. So it has looked so variously. But one of the things I was just saying earlier that I found that really helped me, a few things. One was community, and I discovered the London Writers Session, which is an online writers session that happens most days of the week, a very small subscription fee. It started in COVID with 2 writers in London. And it has now they have hour-long sessions that happen in most time zones around the world. So the one I go to mostly is the London one. It's at 8 o'clock their time and 3 or 4 our time. And you go in, there are pages of people, like a grid of people that you can see. You write in the chat where you're from, and then you write in the chat what you intend to do. And for me, that's just such a great thing. I know I've got 50 minutes to write in silence with all these people, and I just need to focus on something. So I'm a real deadline person, and that was part of the problem. Not having a deadline was hard for me. So manufacturing deadlines was really important, and this really enabled me to feel like I'm with other people, they're doing the same thing, and at the end of the process, they come back on and go, how was that? And in the chat, some people write, I wrote 50,000 words, and you go, oh, yeah, right, okay.
Yeah.
And then some people write, oh, just, the cat jumped on my lap and I couldn't think about anything. And you can always sort of find where you are. There's someone to relate to.
Yeah.
So I found that incredibly helpful. So all of those things very different. When I'm editing, I tend to be much more disciplined and write because I've usually got a deadline. So yeah, so it has varied enormously.
Yeah.
And I do write in cafes sometimes too.
Excellent.
Because I need the energy of people around me, so I know something else is going on, and then it helps me settle.
Yeah. I can't imagine trying to do anything in a completely silent, like a vacuum. Like I could not fathom that. Even when we got here, I said to a couple people, there's no music on, and I felt really like, I don't know about this, someone talk. I couldn't do it in the quiet. My poor co-worker who shares an office with me.
There's a really great writing app, and I'll try and remember what it's called, but it's got a few choices of soundtrack, which is sort of this ambient noise, and then it's got a few choices of a little screen that you write into, and on that screen is kind of very ambiguous kind of colours or whatever. And for those of you who've read the book, at the beginning she talks about the painting. And so there was a screen in this, and so I would put on my headphones and I'd put on the music, and it was almost like Pavlov's dog.
Yes.
I'd go, oh, that's right. I kind of almost hypnotized myself into writing, and I'd have this screen in the background, and when I looked into it, I thought, what can I see? And I made it up from there. It was sort of just looked a little bit snowy. There was something in there, but that's where the painting came from. So that I found really helpful too.
Excellent. So that's the painting, which is at the start of the novel. What was the spark for this novel? Was it the painting? Or no. Okay. What was the spark?
A few different bits and pieces.
Feel free to take a drink of water for you. Sorry, I timed that question really badly.
Sorry, I tend to be very long-winded, as you've now picked up, I know. Few things happened. I was approached to co-write a book with a woman who'd had a stroke. She was a nurse. She was able-bodied. She was on a plane from Geraldine coming home to Perth, and she had a stroke out of nowhere, and she ended up hemiplegic, so half her body was paralysed, half not, but that effectively meant she needed to use a power chair. So she was negotiating a whole different body and life. Her husband had given up his job to care for her, and they were navigating this together. And I got approached by her social worker, bizarre kind of connection, but she said, Rosalie is writing this to try and understand what's happened to her, but she thinks she'd like to make it into a book, and would you like to edit it? And I was like, okay, I've never edited a book. Why don't we just have a chat, and maybe I'm not the person, but I can point you in the direction. So I met these two, and I just fell in love with these people. They were so beautiful, and they were such a great couple. And I said, okay, let me pitch this to Fremantle Press. And Fremantle Press said, stroke recovery, yeah, what's new? Which is a bit harsh, but, so I went back to them and we chatted, and I said, what about we write the book about this Gordon's story as well, because he's given up his job to care for you. It's the stroke that changed both your lives. So I interviewed him because he didn't want to write, edited it with his approval, worked with Rosalie to make it bigger, and it was chapter on chapter, and we published it. Years later, because of that book, I was approached to work in disability with the campaign to get the NDIS, and I'm very sorry for what's happened with that. So, but what we fought for, what we got, not two different things. But I came across this thing that was happening. There were 8,000 young people in nursing homes who were just young people with disabilities. They were being moved in at the rate of 50 a week because supposedly there was nowhere else for them to go. And I just could never get that out of my brain. And I kept thinking, why haven't I seen this? There were some reports, but, nothing much else. Then my parents in the early 90s went into aged care. And suddenly I was seeing it from the inside. And I thought, oh my God, they weren't in a good one to begin with. It looked fabulous, but it wasn't, as it turned out. We got them out after 9 months and they went somewhere very nice. But I started to think, what would this be like as a young person? It's hard enough as an older person. And what would it be like if you couldn't speak up for yourself? And then the other thing that happened was I was in a dog park, the same dog park I write about. And I was, it's got this road, it's big, and it's got this road pavement that runs around the outside. But most people take their dogs into the bowl of the park, but you have to go down kind of a little bit of a steep, grassy slope. And I saw this woman in a power chair, and she was going at speed, like she was impressive. And I thought, wow, you look interesting. And then I thought, I wonder if your chair can go across the grass, because if it can't, you are on the outside. And because I was working in disability, and then my brother-in-law, who Shane is based on, got motor neurone disease. And so sort of that was happening over years. But when I saw that woman, I started to remember all the amazing women I'd worked with who had disabilities, who were funny and feisty and determined and problem solvers. And I thought, that's who it is.
Yeah, I love that. Isn't it funny how people watching can become such a source of inspiration? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a shocking eavesdropper as well.
Excellent.
So watch out.
You're a professional busybody.
I am a professional busybody.
You mentioned that in I don't know if it was in the finished copy as well, but it was we get readers copies, as you guys know I brag about. And it was in there in the Dear Reader, and I absolutely loved that. I may need to steal that if that's okay.
Please do.
Perfect.
It's yours.
Because I love doing that, going to a cafe and just kind of taking it all in
and thinking, what's their story?
Yeah.
I'm trying to write something else at the moment, and I'm just sort of not in the zone at the moment. And I was looking at some prompts from someone, and they said there was a thing about eavesdropping. Collect 5 things you've heard. So so I'm going to be doing that now.
Perfect. And I want to touch on, you talked about how you saw that woman and thought, yeah, she seems fierce. I bet she's got a story to tell. And then we have Tracey, and she is so funny and fierce, and she looks out for the people around her. But initially, she has very restricted voice, at least externally to the world, and also mobility access to be able to affect her surroundings. That would have been a challenge to write. How did you navigate that challenge where you gave her, or you gave the reader, I should say, enough of her to see that she was not a passive person?
That's a really good question. I knew I had to start her off in a tough place, and I'm sorry if that was a tough part to read first, but she had to have a trajectory going from kind of the worst to, a better place. And I don't know, have many of you read The Diving Bell and the Butterfly by Jean-Michel Bauby?
I've got it on my TBR shelf.
Yeah, so a Frenchman who got locked-in syndrome, and I remember reading that, and he wrote it, and he died. He didn't live for very long with that, and he died. But I remember thinking, I find it hard to write. How would you blink? All he had was his eyelid to blink out on an alphabet board. And I think that just stuck with me, and I thought, wow, what a situation to write. Like, what a challenge to live. I can't imagine that, but I wanted to sort of go from there. But I think what I learned from people with disability that I worked with who've become friends and relatives was that people are the same people after they've had the accident. They're not different people generally. They're coping with a different reality. So she's still going to be, she might not be able to speak, but she's still going to be feisty and mouthy and all the rest, and she's going to find some way to channel it, whatever that was. So it was a big challenge, but I actually really enjoyed it. And it also gave me a lot of license, like that thing of people talking over her, when they're turning her and they're gossiping, and she learns all these things she probably shouldn't learn. But there are also some of them who are not good carers, are either don't think she can understand or don't care if she does. And I found that extraordinary, and I really wanted to pierce that and show it, because I've seen it happen as well. I've seen people being overlooked so many times, and I've heard people speak about this as if they suddenly become invisible. And I know when I was working with Rosalie and Gordon on that book, Rosalie was constantly saying, people just talk to Gordon. And there's Rosalie, she's perfectly able to speak, brain's fine. And they're saying, what would she like? And he's going, well, I think we probably should ask her. So I think that seemed to be a common experience, and I wanted to explore that. And I knew that wouldn't be, I knew she'd get a voice. I knew I had to give her a voice at some point. So it was like, this will be the beginning bit.
Yeah. And I just want to use that as an opportunity to circle back to, you mentioned near the end of the book that there is a placard that has a number of placards, but one of them says, nothing about us without us. And I want to loop in discussing your sensitivity readers now with that, because that is so true, right? That she doesn't have a voice to start off with, but there are people that choose to speak over her or to ignore her, and then there are others who make sure that she is included. And I want to talk about how important it is to have those sensitivity readers, but also the role that they play in the process for you.
I had quite a steep learning curve with that. When I started the job, I was the WA coordinator for the Every Australian Counts campaign, which was trying to get the voices of people with disabilities and their families in front of politicians, out in the public, to describe what they needed to change the system. And early on, this does not reflect well on me, I have to tell you, I was making a poster for an initial rally we were having, and I was putting in pictures, and I don't know, I was just kind of grabbing pictures from wherever. And one of the pictures was of people doing therapy in a pool. Well, I put the poster out, and I got a lot of hate from people saying, what are you doing? Why are you showing us in a therapeutic position? Why are you emphasizing the disability like that? Why aren't you just showing us out in the world doing what we do? And why didn't you consult us? And I thought, oh, well, I didn't have an answer because there wasn't a good answer. I should have done that. And so I learned from that minute that everything that was out there had to come from people who lived this day in and day out. And they've fought so bloody hard to get their voices heard because they have often not had a seat at the table. So the least I could do was to be listening and then, putting that out there. So when I did this book, I was very, very conscious. I'm not a woman with a disability. I can't speak for people with disability, but I still wanted to see if I could write that character. So once I got it to a kind of, I've obviously done a lot of research, but once I got it to a sort of robust draft, I paid 3 women with disabilities to read it and to give me feedback. And 2 of them were women who had fought their way out of nursing homes. One woman said she lost 6 years of her life. She had MS and she was shoved into a nursing home. Anyway, there were those 2. And then there was another woman I'd worked with who has quadriplegia, so very similar level of disability to Tracey. And she's one of the most amazing women I know. And she had had an accident, which meant she had quadriplegia. And I also knew that Sam would be kind to me even if she hated it. She'd find some way of not giving me a very hard time. So I have to say that when I handed over the draft to those 3 women, I was terrified because if you say you believe in nothing about us without us, which I did, I was going to have to wear the consequences. And what if they said, sorry, that's just a pile of whatever, don't publish that? Or what if I'd offended them, So I sent them a set of questions as well. And there was, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks or something between giving it and getting back the response. And the response was fantastic because they were really glad that there was a woman with a major disability as a main character, which they said they haven't seen much of. But then they gave me lots of insights that I wouldn't have known about. Small things, big things. One was Sam said the character of Joy, she needed more agency, which was true, and I changed that. So I used all of those insights. And Sam was someone I kept going back to, and I didn't pay her. She just was most amazing support. So I felt like once I'd done that, I had done my due diligence. Plus I'd read all of the testimonies at the Royal Commissions, but it needed that voice of lived experience. And so I was very lucky to have these 3 amazing women. And I met 2 of them for the first time in Melbourne. And it's been a joy. Yeah.
Oh, I assumed that they'd be WA based, but okay, so it was
only one,
and it was community that you got to make as well through the process of creating this novel.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you so much. And so, as you've mentioned just now, through the work that you'd done, you discovered that there was all these people young people who had been told there's nowhere else for you. You've got to go into a nursing home, and I imagine that writing the grim realities of the nursing home, it was such a fine line for that to not be the overall tone. But you've managed to make it a community as well.
Thank you.
You don't shy away from the horrible malpractice that happens and the neglect, but you also showcase individual personalities of these fantastic people that live there. How did you find that balance?
That is just so reassuring to hear you say that, because there were a few rejections on this book saying too dark.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a tough subject matter, but I was hoping, especially that the voice of Tracey, being kind of not politically correct all the time and, would take you through that.
You said before she's mouthy. I love that. I wrote that down because I was like, yeah, that's what she is.
She's mouthy and she's determined. I think it was my parents being in a nursing home where they were living it, not me. But, I was in there with them so much of the time. And I'm sure a lot of you have had that experience. And, you see the good and the bad. You see the good and the bad carers, the carers that you worship because they just go above and beyond. And then you see the ones that you think, my God, you should not be in this job. And then you're in these situations which are hard, but they're funny sometimes. So I think I was trying to channel all of that in there. And my Maggie is a bit of a love letter to my mum. My mum has the family curse of osteoporosis, or had, and she was very bent. She was tiny. She was 5 foot when she was standing upright. So when she had osteoporosis, she was a lot smaller. And she was a really fabulous cook, like self-taught. We were very lucky. And in this first place that they went into, which we'd found and all agreed on, which was supposedly really great, the food was terrible, terrible. And my mum did have a walker, and she did have food in her walker. And, so there was stuff that I stole. But I think when I was in there, I was just observing a lot of the time. And I did want there to be, a variety of people in there. Because Tracey's a bit, at the beginning, she doesn't want to know anybody. She hates it. And if she doesn't go outside her own room, she can pretend it's not happening. But then and she's got a bit of a bias. She sees those women in the princess chairs as not being people. And then gradually, over time, she begins to see them as people. So, yeah, I think it was just through being a lot in nursing homes and seeing that and seeing what my parents were coping with. And my mum and dad were really very big characters. And so I borrowed a bit of that too.
Yeah. Did you have, I'm trying to think of you planning this out and observing all these people. Did you have any characters that you created that you went, no, that's too many, I've got to take them back out?
That's a really great question. I'm not sure I remember because this happened over so many years. Yeah. It went through a few drafts. But certainly when I went to publication, we kept everybody in. And they wanted me to expand Brooke, the best friend.
Yeah.
And that was actually a lovely thing to go back and do because I enjoyed doing that. And it gave a bit more of backstory on Tracey. So I didn't chop any out. Yeah. I don't know how I went for balance. I think I just knew that they had to embody sort of different things. And Doris, don't know where Doris came from, but I loved Doris in the end. She was just another gutsy kind of woman who, and unfortunately is going back and forth into dementia. So, sorry, I don't have a really definitive answer for that. They did keep growing, but they let me keep them all in. So that was good.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad you mentioned Doris. I did love her. I don't know. There was just something familiar about her in a way. I think we've all got those big personalities.
All got a Doris in our life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we see almost, it's trite to say, almost a hero's journey in Tracey, where she discovers what she is capable of and she believes in herself. But she's also she fights for and manages to get some more support, that those things that enable her to speak to others so that they have to listen. And those technologies, we, again, near the end, there's another, those signs were very well chosen, where it says disability is not the tragedy, lack of support is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is reflected in her journey so much as well, where she realizes that she is the same person and she can still do all of those things. And I want to sort of talk about how the lack of and provision of that support changed Tracey's story and how she perceived herself.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the other many lessons I got from the disability campaign, that all people cared about was just getting the support they needed to get on with their lives. They weren't whining about having a disability. That was kind of, in a way, secondary. That was just like, well, what do I need to be able to shower every day so that I can get up and transport so I can get to work, or whatever it was. So Tracey needs a whole lot of things that she's not getting in that nursing homes. And you see the progression of, I did have a bit of joy writing that cupboard where they've just shoved everything. They've shoved the phone that she needs so desperately, but, nobody's been able to set it up for it because they don't have time. So, yes, I think in the beginning she's mired in that, really, I just want to end it. It's just too terrible. And then as her brain starts to come online and she starts to find a bit of community, she does realise she's still got a life, but she needs those things to make it happen. So there are good carers who will help her with that. There's Zoe, the woman who comes in to do the campaign, and she's the one who ultimately gives her the phone. But I think, that sign, disability is not the tragedy, lack of support is a real sign that was at one of our rallies. We walked through the streets of Perth with about, 800 people. We ended up at Supreme Court Gardens, and there was someone with that sign, and I never forgot it because it seemed to sum up to me what people were saying. And when I did the first launch, one of the wonderful women who was in the campaign, Raina, who lives with a disability and is in a power chair and always wears purple and is a very big character, she said, "Jerry, that was my sign." I said, I'd completely forgotten. She said, yeah, that's my sign. And it just seemed to me like the nub of the whole thing, right? Yeah. Because if you talk about level playing fields, you need a ramp up to there. I was just listening to an interview yesterday where a woman was talking about a park that they changed the rules on so that you can no longer kind of get access there. And she's got a daughter in a power chair, and she said, the message that sends to us is, you're not welcome. You're not the same. Yeah. And so it was, and I think once I'd had that sort of checked out by the women who read the book, I felt like that was a satisfying thing to do. Yeah.
And just touching on the park, nature is such an outlet for Tracey, and having access to that park, it really does give her space. I think she's so hemmed in by the environment that she's in when she's in the nursing home, but when she is able to actually leave under her own steam in her power chair, that's where we almost see her kind of undergo that sort of mental process of accepting and understanding that she is still the person that she always was as well. And you reference, I've even got the page number, so you can tab it in the book.
A girly
on page
swatch.
133. But here, without all the usual noise that filled my life, I see them as so much more than a backdrop. See how much life they carry, how they form communities, how they decorate the landscape like living works of art, all without saying a word. And she's talking about the lemon-scented gums in the park. I feel like that is something so that we take for granted that she doesn't have when she's in the nursing home, and she's trying to find it in the painting right at the start. And I absolutely loved that connection with nature there. Can you sort of describe where that came in? When you were doing the writing process, where did it come in that, okay, she needed to go to the park and she needed to have that outlet, and how can I make that happen?
Yeah. She needed to be in community, right? Yeah. And it was discovering herself in community. Yeah. So that had to be sort of almost a third in, where you've gone through the tough stuff and then she sees a new vista. She sees that what might be possible. And I think too that Tracey's been this person who's flown around the world from one job to another. She's the fix-it woman. She's parachuted in to fix these problems. She's also a commitment phobe, so she likes that too. She leaves all the relationships she's had and, parachutes out again. And she's never really slowed down to smell the roses. Yeah. And so she wouldn't choose to be in the situation she's in. But when she is out in that park, suddenly things have slowed and she's able to see, I think, what she's missed before in her whirl of a life. And I think that I was walking in that park every day with my dog. So I inherited a dog from a friend who died, and I had another dog. They were both called Charlie, by the way. So I had two Charlies. And this was I inherited that park, and it's the most beautiful park. And there are these lemon-scented gums, and every day I'd walk the dogs, and then I'd have a little notepad in my car, and I'd come back and I'd scribble something. So I felt like on my walk I'd be collecting things for the novel, and I'd be trying to look at it through her eyes. And I think one of the things I liked about that was because the trees are so beautiful, they do decorate the landscape and they don't say a word. And she's also can't say a word. And yet they have so much value. So I think there was that as well. And nature is like that, isn't it? You know, it stands there around us and it doesn't call out to us, and yet it gives us so much. So yeah,
absolutely. I loved that. I loved the park, and I loved all the dogs as well. I mean, is a book if it doesn't have a dog in it? I don't know. So back to the craft of writing. In your acknowledgements, you reference the wonderful Catherine Hayman and the Australian Writers Mentoring Program. Can you explain what that program is? Because Catherine, oh God, I hope I don't make a mistake. She recently released Circle of Wonders.
Circle of Wonders, yeah. And good. I did a in conversation with her event in Perth.
Perfect.
So just have to tell you a funny little story about serendipity. I was going up to the Readers and Writers Festival in Geraldine a million years ago, and I was going as an interviewer, and I'm scared of flying. Yeah, sad but true. And anyway, I was going in the car, and I was really looking forward to having 5 hours on my own because it was a busy mum, and you know, this was going to be a little bit of me time. And I got a call about 6 o'clock in the morning from the festival to say, oh, sorry, one of our writers has missed their connecting plane. Would you mind if they came with you? And actually I thought, oh, bugger. Oh,
yeah,
you know,
that's me time.
That's me time, God. Anyway, so Catherine turned up at my house. We didn't know each other from a bar of soap. And we literally started talking, and we did not stop the entire journey. And she's just she's a mad, wonderful, creative genius who's also one of the most generous people I'd ever met. So we had a lot to do with each other in the festival and kind of became friends, kept in touch. And she had started this Australian Writers Mentoring Program. So it's her plus a stable of Australian writers, both in fiction and non-fiction. And so you have to pay, and you choose your mentor according to, you know, what sort of genre they're in or what have you. And they will take you on for a period. So generally you don't do a whole book with them. It sort of depends what stage you're at. It varies a lot. And so with me and Catherine, I'd done a couple of courses with her online, and then I did maybe over 6 months, I did 4 sessions with her where she read 10,000 words each at a time. It was probably longer than that, and then would give me feedback. And it was the most amazing thing to have someone in your corner who's just there for your project. And she taught me so much about world building and all the rest, and I can't recommend her highly enough. I just didn't have enough money to do any more, but it was enough. It was enough I'm a deadline person. I need something and someone to work to. So it was a fantastic way for me to progress that novel. And highly, highly recommend.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And you talked before, well, we talked right at the start about HarperCollins, amazing, one of the big 5, as they say. I feel like we're, you know, when they say the big 5, I feel like we could also have like fishermen being like, oh, it's one of the big 5. But for us,
fish John West reject.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, that could be a fun thought exercise. What would each publisher be if they were a big fish? Okay, I'll leave that to you guys. What was it like being published by HarperCollins and going from, you know, having these periods of creating your own artificial deadlines to craft this story, seeking out for yourself these mentoring programs to having suddenly a publisher be like, okay, this is, yep, we love what you've got, but this is the process that it has to go through?
I think I've just read an article, I can't remember who it was by, but by a writer saying how many people are being pushed too quickly through the process and how it's kind of damaging for a lot of people. I feel so lucky because that was not, I had the most amazing process. So the commissioning editor, who I met at a literary speed dating event where I had 3 minutes to sell my book to her online.
Yeah.
She was just a young woman, just so amazing. She got Tracey, she got the story, and she said, when we do this, I'll have a conversation with you at the beginning of the editing process where I'm going to outline some things to you that I think maybe need some work, but I'm never going to make you do a certain thing. You know, we're going to talk about it and then we'll see what happens. Yeah. So I was very reassured by that. So we had this conversation, which went over a couple of hours. And the amazing thing was she pinpointed a few things that I felt weren't quite right. And I'd kind of gone on, you know, I'm just going to keep on going here. I'm not quite sure how to fix that. And I can give you an example, actually. At the end of the book, so spoiler alert, where Gary has found the video, in the sort of one of the drafts, the draft that HarperCollins has got, I actually had Gary trying to kill Tracey. And he didn't. He got interrupted and then he got apprehended, right? And I was always a bit like, oh, no, should I do that? It's not a thriller. And she said to me, look, I feel like that's a bit melodramatic. And I said, yeah, so do I. And she said, I don't know, should we, maybe it's not Gary, maybe it's something else, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, I think I've got another way of doing that. So I went away, and there were a couple of other things, not quite as big as that. And I went away and I thought, when I was working in disability, one of the things I saw or heard of was that people who had been abusers usually got away with it. They were good at covering their tracks. Often the people who had been abused were deemed not competent as witnesses. You know, there was a whole lot of things. There wasn't evidence. And so these people would just kind of disappear. But what it meant was they moved on somewhere else with no repercussions. And I thought, wow, if he did that, then that would be more devastating, in fact. And also, I don't think if he's a super predator, which I think he is, you're not going to kill someone if you think you can get away with something you've done. So that was an example of how they said to me, that's not working, but hey, what do you reckon? And I went, yeah, no, let me try this. So apart from they wanted a bit more of Brooke, they wanted a few more beats at the end. But I found that process wonderful because I hadn't had the time to really work on it. And to be honest, it was sort of the forest and the trees. By the time I finished it, I was like, oh God, I've just got to finish this thing. It's never going to be finished. And then I was like, well, I don't know. I can't see it. I can't see it outside myself, whereas they could. And that for me was fantastic. So I am super grateful to them and also for how they handled me. And so you have a commissioning editor who brings you in. We did that initial chat. I wrote that other draft. And then I had this other editor who went through looking for plot holes, characters who weren't quite working. And she was also wonderful. And she wrote me this letter to say, her first sentence said something like, wow, what a wonderful, beautiful, important gut punch of a book. And I thought, oh, I love you. And we've got on famously from then.
We are going to work together well. But it's so true that when you've been sitting with a project for so long, you're so close to it that you can't see it in the same way that a fresh set of eyes, like a new reader, is going to experience it.
Totally.
And I love hearing about how collaborative that process is. It's not them telling you what you have to write. It's them providing insight into what their perspective is. And then you can kind of take it away and work on it from there. And what's that timeline from let's say structural edits are done to publication date? What's the timeline for that?
Good question. I go back a bit. From signing the contract, and then there was a few months over summer where nothing happened, it was about 18 months till the book came out.
Oh, okay,
yeah. So maybe from structural edits done 6 months, something like that. It sort of seemed to take a very long time. It was like child rearing, you know, everything seems very slow, and then it speeds up and you go, oh, where did that go?
You're at the graduation ceremony.
Very much like that.
And that's so bizarre, isn't it? Where like you can go from writing it for 7 years or something like that, and then suddenly 18 months or 6 months. And when you consider that we buy books about 3 months in advance of publication, isn't that crazy? That's the thing for me that is wild as well. And they've already got a cover and a blurb by then, most of the time.
I felt like I could edit that thing till the end of my days. Like they had to prise my hands. They were like, no, Geraldine, no, this is just to show you. Like, you no more editing. I was like, oh.
You're like, but... And what helps with letting it go? Is it them just telling you, no, you're done? Or do you have another project that you've started working on?
I do have another project I've started working on, but honestly, it's a germ of an idea. Yeah. So I think I always wanted this story to be out in the world, and it was honestly a bit of a miracle that it is, because I had quite a few rejections, and I was at a point of thinking, never going to happen. Obviously, it's too dark for people, and I had that in my brain, so I wanted it to be out there. Yeah. And as much as I would have liked to have changed a few things and kept on editing, when they told me it's done, I was like, yeah, good. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Let's get it into people's hands now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the absolutely gorgeous cover. I feel like we need to acknowledge the cover and the gorgeous Carnaby?
Oh, Carnaby cockatoos?
Yeah, Carnaby cockatoos. Yeah. Because I love that they made... as I was reading the book, I was like, oh, that's the bird that's on the cover.
There was another cover before that, and I got it, and I thought, it was a beautiful image, but I didn't quite see the story in there, and I felt very hesitant about saying anything, and I went back to them and said, look, very beautiful image, but I can't quite relate it to the story. And my editor said, interesting, they did too. She said, I voted for the other one. Let me show you. And it was this one. And I have to tell you, when it came out and a friend bought it, and I think she bought it for a friend who has a cat called Pudding. So Pudding,
I saw Pudding.
Pudding is obsessed by the bird on the cover, and Pudding would not get off the book because Pudding is attacking like the Carnaby's cockatoo, and they've had to resort to playing bird sounds on YouTube so Pudding will get off the book, because otherwise they can't get the book away from Pudding. So.
If I was that artist that designed the cover, I'm like, my job is done.
I'm very grateful. Hazel Lamb is her name, and I'm very, very grateful to her.
Absolutely beautiful. Now, we are running short on time, so I would like for the audience to ponder if you've got any questions that you'd like to put to Geraldine. And while you are pondering and letting them mull away, Geraldine, would you mind reading a passage for us? We love story time. We love audiobooks.
Okay. Can I swear?
Yes.
Okay.
I swear.
Done.
And let's hope the stand-up comedian outside, Call it, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to edit this by a paragraph or two, but okay, so it's later in the book. As I speed down the pavement, the rain is spitting lightly and the wind is up. An older woman standing near me at the lights wrestles with her umbrella, which is doing its best to turn inside out, but with some impressive manoeuvring, she manages to hold it in place. We share a smile while we wait for the green crosswalk icon, and I think if I still had that umbrella I bought at the goods store, I would give it to her. I spent hours in that shop, drooling over all the things that were best in their category, especially the umbrella, with its overlapping vent system that disperses wind through the reinforced slits in the canopy, so it never inverts, even in huge winds. There was no way I was leaving without buying that. Suddenly, but like the rest of my stuff, I can't operate. It's all frozen in time in a storage unit, waiting for me to sort. Suddenly, the woman moves even closer, and I'm guessing she's going to share the umbrella as we cross. Instead, she blocks my way and gives me an intensely piercing look. The Lord loves you, even when no one else does, she says. I am speechless, for real. What the actual... She seems to take my lack of response as some sort of permission, and swiftly ditches the umbrella before holding both hands directly over my head, as if God beams will stream from them into my apparently forsaken body, which objectively speaking is in way better shape than hers. I'm praying that God fixes you. Fixes? Like we're at a heavenly repair cafe and I am some faulty toaster. Just when it couldn't get any worse, a warble rises up from the woman, who is clearly the type of frustrated soprano who drowns everyone else out in the church choir. Not that any regular churchgoer could recognise the hymns, as her vibrato obscures all the words. A car toots loudly as it rounds the corner, close to what must be quite the street performance. If I could rev my engines, I would. But failing that, I press one of my most useful phrases saved in the app and slide the speed down to 3/4 so it's extra emphatic. Fuck right off, says my most cultured Catherine voice in her pleasant, measured tones. The woman rears back like she's been backhanded, but still manages to gasp out righteously, "What did you?" "Fuck right off," I press again, before she finishes the sentence. Well, she did ask for clarification. As I make my getaway, the resounding crunch from rolling my 80-kilo machine across the tip of her polished court shoes is the most gratifying sound I've heard in forever. And I don't need any kind of rear mirror to know that she is fish-mouthing in pain. But given she has a direct line to God, I can rest assured that express divine healing is on its way.
A very well chosen passage. What we'll do is we'll get a little bit more light on the situation. If you're happy to, we'll do some signing.
Lovely.
Yeah. So what we'll do is I will scooch over to my little corner, and if anyone hasn't grabbed a copy, I will be there. Or if you haven't grabbed a copy for next month's pick, I will also be there. We'll be joined in person by Anthea Hodgson.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
So we'll be travelling. Thank you. We'll be travelling to Kalgoorlie with some very enterprising young women during the gold rush. Mm-hmm.
Can I just say before we finish, thank you. It really, I can't tell you what it is like to sit in front of people who've read the book or are going to read the book and who take it seriously and who ask such great questions because you've really engaged with it. And that, for me, is just the best thing about doing this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for bringing me down here.